and people.
Okay, let's talk about his chambers, his law practice. It was reputed to be the largest in Nigeria. They say he had about 300,000 law books. What was it like working in those chambers? In terms of, a lot is talked about he's being detribalized. Can you take us through your experience?
Gani did not care where you came from, and he liked to give opportunities to everybody. He wouldn't come and say, "Oh, you are from Ondo," or "I want to take most South people." He didn't also like this issue of connections. Okay, that you needed to come and serve in his chambers or work in his chambers.
Bring a note.
Before you have to bring a note from one of the justices of the Supreme Court. He liked to work with everyone. I mean, for example, I'm one of the examples. I mean, I came from nowhere, no name, no godfather, no godmother. I got into Lagos with a pair of trousers, maybe one pair of shoes, and worked in his chambers.
You walked in there with,
just walked
your
in there.
Request?
Yes, my request, and then, of course, you are subjected to a test. And then that is it, okay? Like, so he wouldn't, he's that kind of detribalized kind of person. He wouldn't want to, he wanted the best. And then the best was your work. In fact, he wouldn't even at times request for the best 2-1 or the best first class.
Yeah.
Or no. He wanted to, because himself was a third class or a pass or so from the law school because of his own problems. But he rose up to become one of the best lawyers in Nigeria. So he never believed also in this certificate kind of thing. He wanted to see, especially to him, hard work meant more than the degree. The kind of work you were willing to put into your practice
after obtaining the degree.
Yes, because the first thing he told us, and he told me and a few of my colleagues the first day we walked into his office, he said, "Look, gentlemen, that there's no shortcut to the top in this profession." I remembered that sentence very well, and it stuck to my head till tomorrow. He said, "Look, there's no shortcut. If you're thinking that you're entering this profession and you want to look for a shortcut to climb to the top, you're wasting your time. It is hard work."
Was he a hard taskmaster?
Absolutely. Some people called him a slave driver. Of course, you've heard that on the streets. But then it was to our benefit. Of course, you had the choice to go to your father's house and sit down and go and drink your mother's milk if you didn't want to work. Okay, so he didn't force anybody to work. You had the choice to also resign. Okay, he drove us to our limits, but then it's to our eternal benefits today. Okay, I tell my juniors, both in my Lagos and Abuja offices, I said, you cannot be a successful lawyer by looking at the time. I'm 8 to 5. Ask any of my colleagues, I stand to be corrected. There is no successful lawyer who continuously looks at the time to say, when will I close? Oh, closing time is, no. There's no closing time until you finish your task. I mean, I remember during the Nadeco days, because we are at the thick of it, he threw us in. And that's one thing with Gani Fawehinmi again, before I digress.
Yes.
I mean, he also did not look at age at the bar. He did not look at seniority at the bar. If you can perform, then he throws you into the battlefront. As a young, lawyer during the Nadeco days, I mean, he threw me into the battlefield. I mean, the arrest of Nadeco leaders, Kokori, Frank Kokori, Ken Sarowa, of course, of Mosop, and all the Nadeco leaders. He threw us into the battlefront and said, look, just go and do it. I remember when they arrested Beko Ransom Kuti. I'll give you this example. It was away in London, and I was one of the youngest lawyers in the chambers. And they were to arraign him before the military tribunal. Okay? And we wanted to seek an injunction to stop the military tribunal from prosecuting Beko Ransom Kuti, because it was going to be in camera and they were going to breach his fundamental right by so doing. It wasn't going to be an open trial and all of that. Chief Fawehinmi called from London. I said, we used to mimic his voice in chambers. I said, okay, well done, good boy. Please go to court. And it was about late in the night. I wanted to close about 7:30. Prepare the papers tonight. This night, the papers must be ready to Beko be arrested. We say, he said, give the phone to the secretary. The secretary said, you're not going home, lock the gate. Lock the gate, Beko's papers must be ready today. We looked at the time, 7:30, so we had to do it, because we had to file the next day in court.
Was he not worried that it was even a military tribunal?
Absolutely not. No. So we filed the papers and filed. He said, first, do it, you can do it. He let you believe in yourself. And guess what? We filed the papers the next day. He gave us a date the next day, the upper day. They gave us a date because it was an urgency, application with an urgency. And then Justice B. Oshogun, who is dead now, I addressed the court for 2 hours. as his young lawyer. He was looking at me, Justice Biochogun. And I told him that the balance of convenience was that he had to stop the tribunal. I said, what if they sentenced him to death? And he didn't grant the injunction. You can't reverse life. The guy looked, he rose up for 10 minutes and came back and gave it the injunction and stopped the military tribunal. No, they didn't respect it. But Gani called me and said, I told you can do it. Well done, my boy. You know, that kind of thing. Yeah. So he drove you. You know, had to believe in yourself. And that was how we carried on.
Let's talk about the Nigeria Weekly Law Report. You know, a lot of people talking about those reports. They say it was published and sustained exclusively by Chief Fawehinmi. You have described it as the best law report the legal profession has ever seen. What is the NWLR?
The Nigerian Weekly Law Report started in 1985, 85, 86 or so. And it is mostly the judgments of the Court of Appeal and the Supreme Court. Let me tell you about how the Weekly Law Report helped to liberalize law. I mean, it was like more or less democracy in the legal profession. Everybody had access to it. Before then, the judgments of the Supreme Court were exclusively for a select class of people. And it was so sad in the profession because you needed to know people at the Supreme Court, justices of the Supreme Court, and then when judgments were given at times 6 months, the Supreme Court judgments, new principles of law had just been, you know, laid down.
Created.
Yes, created. It will be circulated among a few of the senior lawyers.
But why was it like that?
Well, because people were not willing to, you know, take them and publish them, you know. Nobody had the courage, courage to go into publishing because they didn't see it as money making. Lawyers prefer to invest then in big companies, prefer to build houses, you know, because everybody wanted to invest to get money. So Gani was not looking at the profits thing. He just wanted the law to be available to everybody. Gani had the option to, and look at the money he used to set up the Weekly Law Reports. And I hear that for the first 2 years, he didn't make profit. He was just printing and dumping, so losing money.
All those decisions we talk about, the Supreme Court said this in Peter Obi, if we didn't have this,
it would have been terrible.
Weekly Law Report, we wouldn't know.
Angela, it would have been terrible because then you would just be arguing and arguing in court, and one senior lawyer would just come and say, my lord, the position of the law changed about 3 months ago. I mean, I have a copy of the judgment here, and then you'll be looking at, I didn't know about this. But then Gani took the battle from there and said, look, the law had to be available to everybody, and at a very, very affordable rate then, you know. And then he started the Weekly Law Reports. As the judgments are coming out the next week, they're on the table, on the streets for you to buy. Okay? And then people did not believe in the Weekly Law Reports because I remember some of the senior lawyers who, of course, you know, your generation, you always have your rivals, your rivals. You know, it's always usual, you know. Your contemporaries hardly believe in you, but you live for posterity.
Yes.
So his contemporaries, he had his detractors, he had his people who fought him too at that level. And many of them did not buy his Weekly Law Reports for the first 5, 6 years. They thought it wasn't going to be a success.
He continued
printing. He just continued printing and dumping. At times some people will come and pick a few. He will pick and just print and dump, and then he was warehousing them. Guess what? Before the 10 years of the Weekly Law Reports, it became an inevitable tool of practice. Everybody was scrambling for it. And guess what? People started buying the backlog. Oh, yes. And that was when Gani raised his prices.
Mr. Keramu, in all
started buying the backlog from part 1 to the, you know.
Now, let's comment here. Now, in all of this, now you talked about having detractors and all that, which is a natural thing for humans. Okay?
Absolutely.
Good.
Absolutely.
Now, would you say that was one of the reasons we didn't see him being a senior advocate of the nation for quite early?
Well, maybe yes, but also the detraction, as I say, as it were, was also, he also had a problem with the Nigerian Bar Association. Gani was highly opinionated. And that's why you see this thing in his chambers. Stand up for what is right, even if you are standing alone.
You said he's frank to a fault.
Yes, frank to a fault. And somebody described him at the weekend as a slave of his own conscience. He was a slave of his conscience in the sense that he put his belief before human relationships. He didn't mind whether you were his enemy Of course, once you are doing what is right, he picks up the phone and calls you and says, well done, well done. And you are the bitterest enemy. But so long as at that point, I mean, the Abiola's case is the point.
Yes.
A point in, because